Good morning, everybody. Very warm welcome to you all for this morning's webinar on expert ways to boost your Microsoft 365 tenant. My name is Taras Young, and I'm the marketing manager here at CompanyNet. For those who don't know us, CompanyNet is a cloud services provider and a Microsoft Gold partner based in Edinburgh in Scotland, but working across the UK and focusing on Microsoft 365 and Azure. And we're currently in our 25th year in business. This is part of our regular series of webinars in which we try to unpick various aspects of Microsoft 365 and hopefully give you some insight and maybe even some ideas about how you can augment your own environment. Just to let you know, this event is being recorded, so don't worry if you miss anything. We'll make the recording available to you after the event. If you have any questions during today's webinar, I'd encourage you to use the Q&A function, which is built into Teams, and we'll share any questions at the end. So without any further ado, I'm very excited to introduce today's speaker, who is Dave Campbell, CompanyNet's lead Microsoft 365 consultant. Dave.
Good morning, everybody. It's as Taras mentioned, my name is Dave Campbell. I'm an M365 consultant here at CompanyNet. Been in the business a long time, as you can tell with the grey in my beard, but generally working with Microsoft technologies all the way through from on-premise architectures through to the cloud, from the adoption, from the inception of the cloud through to how it's evolved and changed today. Today we're going to talk about a few slides. We're going to talk about how we liken or how we kind of use the analogy of the Microsoft 365 Rubik's Cube. What that means, before we then step out of the slides and start doing a little bit of a tips and tricks session. But let's step into the agenda and we'll kind of go through what we have coming up today. So first and foremost, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the M365 Rubik's Cube and how M365 and all of its moving parts can be likened to the Rubik's Cube, as well as the numerous amounts of solutions that you can kind of have and ways to kind of solutionify and solve the M365 problem. Then we're going to talk about traversing best practice. Best practice comes from lots of different places. So it's all about understanding what's the right best practice and how to implement that and why it's so important. Then the kind of bulk of today's session is going to be a tips and tricks session. So we're going to come out of the slides and we're going to talk about a couple of things around the tenant customization and configuration, Defender as a whole, some compliance aspects, Office configuration, Teams best practice as well, before then moving into lastly the Power Platform. And then we're going to kind of finish on just kind of what's next and how to embrace it really, and that's where we'll talk about Microsoft Ignite, which is just recently finished, and we'll kind of go through the kind of booking news really briefly just to show you what's coming down the path. And then we'll talk about ways that you can keep on top of that. So keep ahead of the curve, keep and manage these things as they kind of come out. So as applications are changing or as new products are coming in. So let's start by looking at the M365 Rubik's Cube and explaining what we mean by that. So first and foremost, the kind of Microsoft 365, there's a multitude of products in there. There's applications, there's solutions, there's elements, there's services, there's lots of stuff to think about. So ever-changing catalog or ever-expanding catalog of products included with the enterprise licensing and with SME premium licensing as well. There's a lot of functionality now being added into that. Primarily talking about M365 licensing here rather than Office 365 licensing. So all of the SME kind of licensing packages, especially the premium-based ones, have a lot of the kind of enterprise-level functionality in there now, which is great to see. So much power across the platform. So with things like Power Apps, Power Automate, things like Azure elements that you can adapt and adopt within your organization. There's so much moving parts. There's a lot. I mean, when someone first comes to have a look at M365, they probably panic because there's so much there to choose from, so much to govern, so much to administer. So you can see how we're starting to liken that to the Rubik's Cube there with the kind of the complexity in there. And we'll talk a bit more about the complexity just now. So the complex architecture, there's complexity within the backplane of the platform. As I say, Azure Active Directory is there, but you've got all of the kind of power of Azure setting off of that. So it's all about tapping into those services, but then gathering or gaining a bit of a knowledge about those services and how they hang together. It's very complex. There's lots of articles out there. There's lots of advice and best practice, as we've kind of mentioned at the outset. So it's all about making sure that you're on top of that, really. And it can be hard to do because a lot of people are pigeonholed or pocketed with their knowledge, whereas, you know, I suppose one of my kind of role, or my main primary function of my role, which is M365, is to understand every aspect of M365, how it all fits together, how we govern and manage that, and then pass that on to our customers and help them kind of move forward in great ways. Obviously, complexity with licensing, there's so many different elements to think about. So there's so many different types of licensing to think about. So understanding how your licenses currently work, and then how accessible or affordable some of the additional services are as well. So it's really complex. Every different area of M365 tends to have its own licensing guide as well. And then there's an abundance of solutions, a vast number of solutions within the platform, and that's, solutions that are out of the box, or solutions or custom solutions that you build upon the platform as well. So lots of things to think about there. And just the last kind of point there, can obviously be sometimes hard to manage and administer, as we'll kind of mention as we go through today's session. So let's look a bit kind of deeper into how things are evolving and changing, and this kind of statement here about things are getting better. So integration across the Microsoft Cloud is becoming more common. So, I mean, we've seen this more often with Microsoft Defender security platform. All of the tools are becoming more integrated with each other, integrated with the platforms that we collaborate and work on. So Teams, things like communications compliance coming in there from a compliance perspective, and managing, what's happening in conversations that are happening, collaboration, co-authoring of documents, being able to see that and controlling that and administering that, it's all becoming easier. And I suppose the ultimate goal with Microsoft is this will all move into a kind of a central administration point. Still a long way away, that's for sure. I thought we'd be there by now, but we're not quite. But it's definitely the way that Microsoft are going. It's the way that the platform is going, and it's going to get better and better as time goes on. And security is evolving into Microsoft Defender with better administration. So, one of the big announcements at Ignite is the change of name of Cloud App Security, which is one of my favorite products. That's now changed to Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And everything else is now under that umbrella of Microsoft Defender, which is a great thing, because as I mentioned in the previous slide, in the previous point there, integration is so important to get these products right. Things like behavioral analytics and ways that you can automate your investigation and response. Just really cutting edge stuff there that's really making security a breeze nowadays. Small to medium enterprise and enterprise licensing now includes more than ever, which I suppose adds to the complexity. But as we evolve into the more integrated model, it'll become easier to kind of manage these things, and having all these tools available to your end users who are able to kind of collaborate and even on Power Apps and Power Virtual Agents, in great kind of ways. It's only going to kind of get more expansive as time goes on. So it's understanding moving parts, understanding how they're changing, and then knitting that together into your own administration and manageability. More function on collaboration features than ever at your users' fingertips. I mean, we've seen how Teams has evolved since its creation, since its implementation, and how that's now going to be a window into your organizational data, with the expansion of the search functionality as well. And then more control and visibility over chats and how people are using Teams is only going to aid things as we go further into there. So it's trying to make people, well, not make people, but encourage people to use Teams as a platform rather than just using Teams as a collaboration tool. And then compliance and governance as well are forefront, and especially with a lot of the cutting edge technology that's coming out of there, automated responses, artificial intelligence and machine learning really playing a part in the future of compliance and governance. Dashboards at your fingertips where you can go and get really rich information about, how compliant you are to the kind of legislation that you need to align to. So it's lots of good stuff there. It's only going to get better, and I think it's a great thing. But how does it all fit together? So, as with the Rubik's Cube, there may be a lot of different ways to do it, as you can imagine. But all of these ways are valid and are usually founded on best practice. And I'll mention best practice, or I'll go through best practice in a bit more detail in a second. But with so many layers, it can be hard to follow. So, and I'll give you a kind of more of what I mean by that in a second. So let's dive into traversing best practice now. So the first point here is quite an important point. It's all about which best practice is the right best practice, because there's so many different people, organizations, product, teams, etc., that give you or recommend to you the best practice for their application, their service, their consumable. Yeah. So a few kind of examples of that. So, Microsoft best practice is obviously quite popular, and they're quite valid with their kind of sharing of that best practice. Whether that's through docs, whether that's through white papers, or whether that's through message center updates or roadmap updates. Lots of kind of good stuff there. National Cyber Security Centre, NCSC guidance as well. So not just about Windows 10, Windows 11 anymore. It also incorporates your M365 Tenant and guidance there about how it should be configured if you want to conform or minimize the risk of cyber attack. GDPR adherence, it's introduced some time ago now, but it's something that's still very, very kind of forefront in people's minds, especially compliance officers, etc. So it's important to understand, where you can get the kind of best practice or the recommendations for things that you need to implement in your tenant and wider that are going to help you kind of lower the time it takes to kind of manage and administer these things. And then Microsoft Partner Best Practice. Now, I've highlighted this one because I think it's really important. So organizations like ourselves, CompanyNet, we use Microsoft Best Practice, but we also use NCSE Best Practice. But we also use our own best practice from, administering, managing, implementing these solutions with customers across the country. And it's all about, molding that to give you the functionality that you should be getting as part of your licensing, but also securing that in a way that doesn't hinder the way that you collaborate, but it gives you that control and that protection, that kind of safe feeling of being able to kind of to step further into the Microsoft landscape. So having a partner there that has that experience is really important, I think, in any customer's journey or any organization's journey. And many more. I mean, as you can imagine, even application developers, they'll have their own kind of best practice that they align to, and it's all about fitting that best practice into the wider Microsoft 365 tenant. So it's all about this control without hindrance, which is a really important thing. So it's about strictly controlling, securing your environment, so securing the Microsoft 365 Rubik's Cube without hindering productivity. So still enabling collaboration, enabling the ability to kind of collaborate with external organizations. All of the really great stuff that makes work today so much easier. Yeah. And then providing real collaboration whilst ensuring safety first, just as I mentioned there, just to kind of highlight that. So if we take a step back and look at the out-of-the-box experience and how that's evolving, so introduction of the zero trust model from Microsoft, so expect attack and plan accordingly. The zero trust model is the model that Microsoft are using for a lot of their toolage, their products and services. So what this does is this encourages that they're pre-configured to be restrictive in the sense of security, but then they're not hindering the way that you function. So here we're looking at the attack planes, we're looking at identity, we're looking at devices, we're looking at Windows 10, specifically as well, or Windows 11 more specifically, because zero trust model is been implemented out the box there. But it's all about configuring the policies that you can with immediately or as quickly as you're able to, and not just waiting for the attack to happen to kind of reactively respond to that. So that's really important, and I'm sure we'll have another security session at some point where we'll delve a bit deeper into the zero trust model. But it's a great model. I'd highly recommend you do a little bit of Googling and have a little kind of scan over the kind of literature around that. Access to more and more capabilities and additional controls. So out of the box 3 years, 4 years ago, it's completely different out of the box now. I remember seeing the Microsoft wheel of products. That's probably not been shared more recently because there's too much in it. So it's all about, you've got all of this extra things available to aid your organization. So that's something that you need to think about in the new world and the new out of the box. The old world is still open by default, so that would be external sharing, federation, things like that. Legacy authentication and all that kind of thing. It's all there enabled by default, and that will be changing. That's something that Microsoft are quite focused on, is to make sure that when they provide you with a tenant, with a kind of service from their data centers, that they're going to provide you with an out-of-the-box secure solution. I think this will probably take a bit of time to get to kind of generally available, but it's something to keep your eyes on the horizon for. Built-in best practice tools as a starting point. So there's a lot of kind of tools, dashboards, cards and elements that you can utilize within your tenant. They give you a great kind of starting point for building your best practice or applying your best practice. So understanding how to implement your best practice. So aligning to best practice is straightforward. Everyone's shouting from the rooftops about what the best practice is. But it's all about implementing it rightly or correctly. That's a new word I've created. Correctly for your organization, because every organization is different. Every organization, or every sector especially, is different. So it's all about aligning that to your organization, etc. So it's all about making sure that you have it aligned to your requirements. And then best practice start at the tenant. So having a look over your tenant's configuration settings is definitely recommended. And I'll step through a couple of options to look out for when we step into the demo in a second. But definitely something that we should be having a look at from the get-go. So it's almost this outside in approach. So plan from the outside, move to the inside of your kind of your organization or your architecture, so that you have this multitude of layers of protection. So if we think about the perimeter that we used to have, that's now exploded and expanded. This is still, controlling from the tenant, controlling down to the devices, controlling down to the users, controlling down to the applications. So it's all about making sure that we're we're moving inwards and protecting as we go. And then each product or app or service has different requirements. So there is a best practice, as I mentioned, for individual applications. But having this overarching best practice methodology that you've adopted within your organization, you have that's controlling that before you get to that level, so that you have that wider kind of capability, and you're making sure that they are who they say they are, their device is who it's supposed to be, and they're able then to access the application that you're providing as part of that service. Or if it's a cloud-based app, that you're again putting that layer of authentication and security over the top of that. So let's step out of the slides now, and we'll go through some kind of things. Some things you might be aware of, but it's some things that I think are quite important to, when you're first creating your tenant, even they're really important to start off with these things. But even if you've had your tenant for a numerous amounts of years, then it's all about making sure that you have these things implemented. You have the control, you have the restriction, but you're not hindering anything that's that the user is trying to do, especially collaboration. So let's step out of the slides. If I can get a hold of my mouse. There we go. So this is just a demo tenant I've created. As you can see here, it's using a Microsoft 365 Business Premium license. So it gives us access to quite a lot of things, even some endpoint management as well, which is fantastic. I think it's great. So let's step through just a couple of kind of handy things to look out for. And one that I think is really important, and if you haven't already, settings and then org settings is a great place to kind of go in, have a look at how things are configured, and start building a plan to align to kind of what you as an organization are able to kind of present to your kind of user base. So we won't talk about domains. It's important when you add a domain that's going to be used for mail, that you implement things like DKIM and DMARC, which is becoming easier to achieve as well. It just helps you ensure that when you're delivering messages, that you're confirming that you are who you say you are, pretty much. It's a really important things when it comes to mail flow. So in the org settings, there's three kind of tabs: services, security and privacy, and organization profile. I mean, if I jump into organization profile, one thing to kind of highlight is your data location. Now, there was a kind of, I suppose, a movement from Microsoft in regards to this. So, they gave a lot of organizations the ability to move their data location for a set period of time. Because a lot of the kind of the tenants that were created in the UK were being localed in the EU, so you weren't quite sure where your data was contained. And if you've got any legislation or guidance or governance that you have to adhere to, you need to know where your data is. So that's now finished, okay. But what Microsoft made a promise around is if you create a tenant in the UK, then you'll get your data at rest living in the UK. However, if you've had a tenant for some time, if you've missed that window where you can move your data and it's maybe still sitting at the EU, then it's worthwhile requesting or sending a request to Microsoft that your data is moved. They're well in their rights to say no. If they do say no, then you're between a rock and a hard place. But I've seen organizations having to recreate their tenant or to move to a different tenant because they've not been able to kind of migrate their data. It really depends how kind of loud you shout, but I think it's really important to come in here and check your data at rest location just to make sure that that you're kind of localed correctly. Another great thing as well is the control that you have over modern authentication. So when it comes to Exchange, so modern authentication is a more secure, better way of getting access to your Exchange emails, your Exchange content. Gets it away from the legacy kind of Outlook client, ActiveSync, POP3, IMAP, all the kind of legacy authentication types. It could be that you are still using some legacy services like Outlook 2013 or Exchange 2010, 2013 even, which means that you'd still have to have a lot of these things enabled. So what you can do though is you can turn on your modern authentication, but you can still leave your legacy authentication enabled. But the recommendation is always to start planning and making a move away from these old kind of authentication technologies or methods, just to ensure that you're moving in the right direction. When you're sure that you have, Exchange ActiveSync out of the equation, then untick it and save it, and then that will be no longer allowed within your organization. It's probably more paramount if you've got a lot of mobile devices out there that are using the inbuilt mail apps. A lot of them require, things like ActiveSync or POP3 or IMAP. What you can do here is roll out the Outlook app, which moves it to kind of OAuth and the kind of modern authentication types. So a lot of change, a lot of business direction that you need to think about there. But it's definitely worthwhile managing that and getting kind of shot of all the legacy technologies. So yeah, and as I mentioned, there's lots of things in here. I won't go through them all today because we just don't have enough time. There's so many other things I want to talk about. But there's lots of elements in here that you can have a look at and see what the default configuration is. You can even see some of the Viva elements coming in here for managing that within the organization as well. So if you've never been in there as an administrator or as a global admin or anyone that manages any aspect of your tenancy, then I would definitely encourage you to do so to see what you have available. Lots of stuff to think about. Cool. So let's step into Microsoft Defender. So as I mentioned at the outset, Microsoft Defender, the way they're moving this is that it's all under the one Microsoft Defender banner. So ATP, Advanced Threat Protection is now part of Microsoft Defender. Defender for kind of endpoint or identity is now all under the Microsoft Defender banner as well. ATP is primarily all the different ATP elements are now incorporated in one of the Microsoft Defender solutions. So generally this is made up of Microsoft Defender for Office 365, which is your things like safe attachments, safe links, automated investigation and response, attack simulations, all of that kind of good stuff lives within Office 365 Defender. Moving then on to Defender for Endpoint, which is your endpoints, your devices. I love it. I think it's great. And I think the announcement at Ignite where there's now a Plan 1 function of that. It's now available to a lot of organizations is great because you'll be able to look at the timeline, you'll be able to see what's happening with your devices. You'll benefit from having device score, where you can go through a list of recommendations and apply those recommendations. Such a great thing. Defender for Identity, which is one of my favorites because it uses the behavioral analytics. So what that will do is it will build up a baseline of your users, your Active Directory, or your on-premise Active Directory as well, as your Active Directory is more native with this anyway. But it'll allow you to build a baseline of what your users do, how they interact, what they, how their audit trail plays out. And then from the back of that, you'll be able to really to kind of interact or to alert when any changes or kind of abnormal elements are kind of detected. So that's any changes to the baseline. So if they're detected, then it's going to create an alert. Some of these alerts with particular licensing, you can even attend to automatically. So the automation engine will come in, it will use a runbook to apply a particular ingestion method to that, quarantine, all that kind of, all the kind of moving parts within the kind of security elements can be, automatically fired to ensure that you're protected before you start investigating and kind of diving a bit deeper into to see what actually happened. And then obviously, as I mentioned, Cloud App Security is now Defender for Office apps. Love that product. I think it's great. Even, the base element of discovery is so paramount because, you can see what cloud apps are being used within your organization. And then from those cloud apps, you can then, depending on the licensing, you can then apply stringent controls and policies over the top of that. And Defender for endpoint, Defender for identity, they all work seamlessly to be able to share alerting, share policy configurations, so that you're able to control things in a more kind of beneficial way. Expanding out from that, you've got things like application control policies, which work hand in hand with conditional access. So you can, block, copy and paste from particular applications, downloads, all this kind of stuff, depending on who's using that. And again, that plays beautifully with conditional access, which is definitely a great product as well. And then you've also got the firewall ingestion as well. So I mean, it doesn't work as kind of, I suppose, more kind of feature rich as a SIEM product will, like Microsoft. Oh my God, I've forgotten the name of the SIEM product that Microsoft supplying. I'll remember. I'm sure Taras will tell me at the end. But yeah, so that's a more feature rich kind of SIEM product. Things like Splunk and all those kind of big players. What this will do is it'll ingest your firewall logs, just to aid with the kind of discovery of applications, auditing of applications, to see what's happening across your organization, more over and above the normal connectors that are created as part of that.
Microsoft Sentinel, Dave.
Sentinel, I knew it was something so silly, but Sentinel, yeah. So that's now moved from Azure Sentinel to Microsoft Sentinel to conform to this new kind of methodology. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on for the future. But it was just more using it as a kind of a representation of a SIEM product. But yeah, so all these things integrate beautifully, configure policies, and here threat detection, alerts, activity alerts as well. A lot of the integration works beautifully. You'll see now, and it has been done for a few months, but you'll see that the Security Center is now called the Microsoft 365 Defender Center. With an E3 or an E5 license, you'll see a lot more here that you can configure. But lots of things that you can do there. So let's step into Compliance Center. So what I really want to kind of give you as a recommendation here is setting up 3 different elements first and foremost. So things that you should configure as part of your tenant. As long as you have the license for it, then these are the things that I would recommend that you set up. One of those is labeling, so sensitivity labels. So if I jump into information protection here, you'll see here that we have labels and label policies. So you can create labels, which are what it is, what it does, what to protect, all that kind of good stuff. The policy itself is where it's being applied to. Yeah. So generally you create a label and you publish it using a label policy. So if I have a look at a label here, there's 2 different elements to a label. If I go and create a new one, let's just give it a quick name, and a display name, and in fact I've got that typo, and then bloop, and then next you'll see here that we have scope first and foremost, but we have 2 different methods here that we can apply a sensitive level, or 2 different areas that we can apply. So files and emails is the standard, so all your files, all your emails. This is the label it will be using, or this is the label that can apply to those if needs be. But then you have this additional element here, groups and sites. You'll see it's grayed out for me because I have stupidly not enabled it before I have come to demonstrate it. Schoolboy error there, but yeah, groups and email and groups and sites are SharePoint sites, M365 groups, and then ultimately Teams as well. Now, what you can do with your label is you can define what you're protecting. So if you're protecting, say, Outlook email, for instance, you can protect, or you can scan that email for any mentions of a national insurance number. You can create custom sensitivity types to scan for as well. If it finds that, then you can apply some reporting, so some tooltips, some really fluffy stuff around that, or you could apply controls to that. So if someone's sending sensitive information to external organizations, then you can control that by either applying encryption or blocking it as well from being sent, so that you're controlling that kind of leaking of that data to anyone that's not supposed to have that information. So you can do that with files, you can do that with emails, and it's all configured within the label policy itself. So you can just mark things, you can mark and protect, whatever you need to achieve. The next thing is the groups and sites. So what you can do is you can mark a group as internal only. And what this would do is you could then control what type of team is created as part of that. So if you created a team, then make sure that it's a private team. So you can apply that as part of the label. You can then also restrict the ability to add external memberships to that, guests to that. Or in fact, you can allow guests if you wish to, but if they're internal to the organization. But you can control the ability to add external people to that team as part of that label itself. And then likewise, you can have an external variation or external label, which allows the creation or the sharing with others, or getting people to come in and get involved and collaborate in your team or your SharePoint site. So you can have those two different elements, and depending on the type of data that's included in that team or group or site, depends on the label that you can apply to that. And this can all be all automated, which I'll touch on when we talk about Teams in a second. But lots of kind of really good stuff there. And then once you've created your label, you would publish that out, and then that'll be readily available in the kind of the Office client for people to utilize as a label. You can also set default labels, so labels that are applied by default. Not a lot of organizations do that because it depends on the split of personal and business and what you allow your end organizations to do. But it's a service that we built for a lot of organizations, so it's something that we know quite a lot about. So if it's something that you haven't implemented yet, then get in touch and we can assist you. We can start you on the path. Next thing is data loss prevention. I think it's really important to apply data loss prevention. It can work in conjunction with labels, so you can apply, depending on the label, you can apply a specific DLP policy that prevents this going from to particular organizations, particular domains, all external. So you can really build some really good kind of loss prevention in there. And it's a great way of applying encryption as well. So outside of the sensitivity label encryption, you're applying encryption at the data loss prevention side as well. So really kind of good stuff there. I won't demonstrate it because I want to get through so much more in such a short time. And then the other one is retention as well. So a lot of organizations need to retain a lot of kind of documents for a specific period of time. So setting up retention for files and emails, even from a organization level policy wise, is important. And then you can also apply retention labels, which can then be applied by users to files specific to them, with different retention requirements in there. So it could be that you need to keep it for 5 years, but then you can delete it after that. So you can configure that as a policy that will automatically trigger. So it's a great way of doing it. And everything that's kind of deleted in there outside of that or within that time period, moves to retention, the preservation hold library, so you're able to kind of retain that information. It's all about managing, your policies and managing your storage for SharePoint and all these other things, but it's something that we kind of definitely recommend that you think about. So very quickly, just wanted to quickly go over the kind of the Office portal as well. I think this is an underused service. It's a great function, even if you are just deploying Office out to your organization. SCCM can be a little bit sporadic when it comes to your configuration of Office. So I find that using this tool in your device configuration, if I create a new configuration here, you can see here that you can create a configuration for your Office deployment directly from here, including language selection, what applications are installed, whether Visio and Project are installed, getting around the whole MSI thing. You can also uninstall any MSI products as part of this tool, and it gives you a good kind of GUI to create your XML file for configuring your Office deployment. So something that I think is really great and underused. You can also apply policy from here as well. So everything to do with your Office suite, your kind of product, your FAT client. You can apply the policy here. Things like show this bar, hide that bar, do this, do that. Things you normally do within group policy, you can apply via the cloud, which is such a great thing. This works hand in hand with Endpoint Manager as well. So if you're already applying some policies via Endpoint Manager, then that's great. This can also work hand in hand with that. It's got some great stuff there about grabbing inventory information from devices as well, which is brilliant. Quickly moving into Teams. So a couple of quick things about Teams. I think it's two really important things I want to mention. Is governance about Teams is really important. So controlling the kind of creation of teams. I mean, if you organically give access to create teams to your organization, you can be guaranteed that one's going to pop up for Paul's birthday, one's going to pop up for Mary's leaving, and all this kind of stuff that you don't have any control over. One simple thing that you can do is to kind of govern the way that teams are created, so you can control via a group as to who has permission to create teams, and that can be managed via a central service. And then from there, you're then controlling how your teams are created. You're not limiting the functionality or the availability to your organization, but you're controlling the kind of organic growth of teams, which can come quite kind of complex and quite hard to manage. One other thing that we like to mention around this as well, because it's such a great solution, is our CompanyNet specific product called Proven. We use this Proven technology to provision, SharePoint sites, Teams, front-ending that with a Power App, for the organization. So what that would really mean is that you've got all the strict control and governance around Teams creation, but you have this process to request a team or request a workspace or request a SharePoint site, which can go through that approvals process with using things like the approvals app or using Teams adaptive cards. So you have that ability for ease of requesting a team, but you've still got that control over the organic growth, which I've seen some organizations that allow organic growth, and it just is really difficult to manage. I can see how they would find it challenging. So yeah, a couple of things there. I think that's a couple of good things to mention. Teams app, very briefly. It's important, I feel, to manage how or which applications are accessible. So, I mean, by default, if I look at the permissions policies for Teams apps, you'll see that everything is allowed. I would always recommend that third-party applications are blocked initially by blocking all third-party apps. And then you carry out an individual assessment of each of those applications. Is it an iframe? Is it something that's consuming data within your tenant? Are you consuming data from their tenant, or from their kind of cloud platform? So really important that you kind of control that by initially blocking, and then once you've approved applications, then you can apply, allow specific apps but block all others. Not generally in your global policy unless it was being globally available to the whole organization, but you can have further policies which are more department and user specific, where you can be allowing certain applications within that permissions policy. So definitely managing that is highly recommended, and it's something that we've thankfully seen quite a lot of organizations doing. Next thing up there is the setup policies. So this is how Teams looks, I suppose, in the kind of the smallest terms. So you can construct how your left-hand bar appears to your users by default, and then also more granularly by controlling or creating additional setup policies. If you're pinning any apps to the left-hand rail, then you can pre-install those by adding them in here, so that when someone clicks on it, it's already available within their Teams client. So a great way of building custom Teams apps and then making them available within your Teams kind of client. So a kind of great thing there. So definitely a few things that we highly recommend are kind of carried out within your organization if you're not doing it already. And then into the good stuff. I mean, I love Power Platform. I think it just gives you so much power at your fingertips. But with a lot of things, you need to control it, because it can expand out. Things can become less secure. Things can be, sitting on an environment that's not made for that, etc. So a really important thing with Power Platform is having an environment strategy. So what I mean by that is having, an environment created for the phase of the application. So if we take this from an application creation and deployment, kind of an agile kind of look at things. So having a development environment where your application lives, where you can start building the application and testing, the dev elements of that. Having then a test environment where you can then move the application to and then hand it out for testing, and then maybe a kind of pre-live or a pilot environment there before moving into production. Yep, so you've got that kind of chain that you're moving through with your application, so that you're limiting what that application can do until it's ready and available to the organization. I mean, that's just apps that I'm talking about there, but things like Power BI dashboards and anything that makes use of an environment in any kind of phase. Things like Power Apps for Teams and Power Virtual Agents for Teams. Really important that you're still controlling the environments that are created out the back of that. And that was just one example. The kind of dev, test, pre-live, production. You can build your environments however you wish to, but also having some governance over the top of there, and you've probably heard this mentioned so many times, is the center of excellence. So what you can have is this methodology over the top of this, so that you have this application moving through these particular environments, but you have a governance process or a process at the start and end of that environment. So when it enters into dev, you've got a clear direction. You've ideated, you've got an idea of how the application is going to benefit the organization, before it's then built in dev and tested within that small circle. And then if it's going through a governance review to ensure that it's up to scratch, it's doing what it needs to do, then it can move into the next section. So you've got that control over there, and that control can be applied at the citizen developer kind of element, or to your physical devs as well. So it can be kind of applied kind of anywhere. And then also you can apply DLP policies or data policies to your environments, which I think is really important. So you can restrict connectors within that particular environment or within that policy from able to connect to other connectors in another environment and another policy. So, your siloing your environments as well, so that you're controlling what sort of data resides within that environment. So business data only. If anyone's using anything personally, then using maybe even the default environment for that. So having that control over the data protection for your environments is really important as well. If you want to chat further about environments and environment strategies, Centre of Excellence, citizen developers, then we do have another session where we kind of delved into that a little bit, which I'm sure we'll be rerunning at some point. But give us a shout. We're experts in the field. We love it. We think it's great, as long as it's controlled in a really kind of intelligent manner. So if I just quickly jump back to the slides, in fact, it'll be very briefly because I'm just going to show you the next slide, which is what's next. So if I jump out of the slides again, and then what we'll do is we'll have a very brief look at the Microsoft Ignite Book of News. I think one of the kind of big things, I mean, just for those who don't know about this, this is such a great thing. I mean, sure, we'll share this afterwards, Taras, but going to this URL, thanks. You'll be able to see all the announcements, all the new things coming out of Ignite, and a really navigatable, easy to navigate kind of element website. Sorry. So you can jump to the points that you're really interested about. So you can see there are lots of kind of stuff that's coming out of Ignite. One of the kind of big things that they're pushing and announcing is Microsoft Loop. I won't talk about mesh in the metaverse. I'm not quite sure where I am on that yet. I think it's a great thing. I prefer legs, but we'll see how that expands. Maybe legs will come in 2.0, but let's see how it evolves. But Loop looks really interesting. There's a client application where you can, have these collaboration workplace spaces where you can bring elements in from the Microsoft 365 ecosystem. So a planner board, documents, live elements that you can bring into this collaboration space. And they're all built using the kind of Loop components as well. So components is the individual elements or the ability to add these live components to a kind of workspace. So not really much. I think we've got a blog up as well. Taras explains it beautifully. So I think definitely head over to the website and have a look at that to learn a bit more about what Loop is and what it could evolve into. What I like is a lot of changes that have come down the Microsoft Power Platform. Things like co-collaboration on Power Apps. I think it's a great thing. So the ability to be able to kind of to work on a Power App at the same time as a colleague. I think it's brilliant. Things like the way they're enhancing AI Builder as well. I don't know if anyone's used AI Builder. Again, we discussed that during our more Power Platform focused webinar. But it's a great model-driven AI function. So document processing, all of this business card processing, all really good models, but what they're doing is they're expanding that so you can build your own custom models and add them in as templates. So some great stuff coming out there, which is good. Another good thing is, well, another interesting thing is the pay-as-you-go licensing for Power Apps per app licensing. So instead of having the license assigned to a user consistently, the way I understand it's going to work is that you can they can have a pay-as-you-go license. So every time they consume that application, they consume a kind of chunk of their license, pretty much. More and more is coming out around that, and I'm sure we'll kind of get to that in the coming kind of weeks and months. And then iOS and Android, the ability to deploy or create your applications for deployment on the iOS store and the Android Play Store as well. Great, fantastic. I think it's really going to help. Lots of other things here. Windows 11, obviously, center stage, as well as Windows 365. which is the kind of the more VDI based approach to accessing Windows. Some Edge changes, how Edge is evolving. But yeah, I mean, the book of news is fantastic, and I definitely recommend that you come over here and have a little kind of read, because lots of kind of exciting stuff coming out, as well as some eye-opening things that you're like, oh, that's going to cause me some problems. But let's get to that in our kind of final slide, which I'll kind of bring up just now. So let me share my slides again. So we talk about what's next. So how can you keep on top of things? So it's really hard to, be managing, administrating, building solutions on your M365 Rubik's Cube or platform architecture ecosystem, lots of buzzwords. But it's also really difficult then to keep an idea of what's coming down the line. So horizon scanning, for example, so keeping your eye on horizon, seeing what's coming new from Microsoft, etc. Roadmap analysis, so understanding where you as an organization are going to, or your kind of 5-10 year roadmap, but also the Microsoft roadmap or the product roadmap that you're kind of bought and sold on. So analysing where that's going to ensure that it conforms to what your roadmap is or what your plans are as an organisation. Really important thing to have to do. Existing product changes as well. So Teams has changed so much since its inception, since its adoption from a lot of organizations. So understanding the changes and how they're going to affect the way that you're working is really important. Current state assessment as well. So how is your Teams configured? How is your Teams running? How is your Microsoft 365 tenant configured? How's that running? And all of the kind of individual elements to make of that, even as you're in your computer there as well. So getting custom recommendations. So, a lot of the kind of the secure score and compliance score, they're giving you kind of baseline recommendations of things that you should configure. But understanding that your own organization and you have your own requirements, really filters down into the custom recommendations that you can receive from, partners like us, really. And then just ensuring that you're always ahead of the curve, which is really important. A couple of kind of Microsoft 365 services that we offer at CompanyNet as well. So Evergreen IT service. I mean, I mentioned there about it being really hard to manage this M365 Rubik's Cube, but then also thinking about what's coming down the line. We offer a service that does that for you. We are always abreast of the changes that are coming. We always align them with your business, your organization, so that we can tell you about things that you need to do proactively, reactively, anything that you need to do or think about when things are changing for your existing products. But then also what's new, what's coming down the Microsoft path, like things like Loop. How's that evolving? How's that's changing? And having someone that's at the forefront of the Microsoft technology, understands this, is close contact with Microsoft engineering teams. It's all about getting that information to you as quickly as possible. And then tenant admin health checks is really important. Health checks are important anyway as an organization, whether that's a more wider health check or a more specialist health check, like, Teams health check. All of these things are really important to kind of aid you and kind of understanding where you are and how you get to where you need to be, which is something that we're kind of experts at doing. So yeah, learn more about the ways we can help you move forward securely and collaboratively. Contact us at the website there. Without further ado, I will end there, and I do apologise, Taras. I believe I've gone slightly over for you.
That's quite all right, Dave.
Thank you.
It's all very interesting and useful, I think. So just before we look at any questions that have come in, and I know we've got a couple, just like to thank you all for attending this morning. we're really keen to carry on the conversation around Microsoft 365 with you all. So wherever you are on your journey, a company that has the means to help you get more out of M365. If you're interested in having a chat about anything that we can do for you, as Dave said, please do get in touch with us. So Dave, we have had a couple of interesting questions. One is, what is leg? So you were talking about the metaverse there. I think if I share my screen, I can explain what the lack of legs is that Dave was talking about. If you give me 1 second.
It made me giggle as soon as I seen it.
So this is Microsoft's interpretation of the metaverse. Is that sharing okay?
No, I can't see that just now. To us.
1 sec, let me just share my screen. Can you see that now?
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
So I think this is what you were referring to, Dave, wasn't it?
Yes.
Microsoft's metaverse, they haven't actually implemented legs in the 3D characters yet, which is
it's probably a bolt-on license that they cost $5.99 or something like that, but we'll see.
Oh, bizarre. Other questions we've had. John asks, how does the AI Builder compare to ML workspaces and cognitive services in Azure?
Yeah, it doesn't really. I mean, the cognitive services in Azure are the go-to for anything more in-depth machine learning, AI, etc. One of the good things about AI Builder is it's making it more accessible to everyday organizations. So model-driven things like form processing, it's putting that power in your hands. So it's really is making it easier for models, so particular tasks or things that you need to achieve. Whereas cognitive services, Project Cortex, everything around machine learning from Microsoft is where the real intelligent stuff is coming. And a lot of that will drive a lot of the templates that are created in AI Builder. But yeah, definitely it's two different things. One's models, one's everything that you can do with it. Hopefully that answers your question.
And also had a question from Graham. So Graham says, we've switched to using Teams a year ago. You mentioned that controlling the growth of Teams is important. Is that still possible with a more mature Teams environment, or is it too late for us?
No, it's never too late for you. You can still be saved. So you can adopt a governance methodology no matter where you are in your Teams journey. I hate using the journey word, but I just did. So you can implement your control of creation of teams, administer and manage what teams are out there currently by Teams administration, so that you can cull what's out there before then bringing in this kind of automation provisioning element that I mentioned. Doesn't have to be the CompanyNet proven service. We'd love it to be that, but using some sort of provisioning service then to kind of drive the ability to, or the ease of access when you're trying to create teams as well is really important. But no, never too late, and it's something that we can help you with if you give us a shout.
And just a final quick one that's come in. Sadiq asks, we're currently using Power Platform. We've used the default environment and never thought about an environment strategy. Is this okay, or are there any downsides of sticking with the default?
Yes, I mean, that's one thing that I probably encourage you to move away from quickly. The default environment is generally open to all, yeah, and the permissions can't be controlled with the default environment. So, this whole environment strategy that I was talking about, so you can't bring that in if you're talking about just the default environment because of the limited control. You should really use that for personal use. Things like citizen developers testing some stuff out. It's good for that. But build environments that are specific for the level of kind of deployment phase that you're at. I think it's really important that you move away from the default environment. So definitely give us a shout. We will definitely be able to help you with that.
Okay. And one more question. What is your view on the client handling management to an MSP with no access to Microsoft 365 admin? Do you recommend it or not?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Say that again,
so
Taras.
What's your view on the client handling management to a MSP, but no access to Microsoft 365 admin? Do you recommend that or not?
I can't really answer that either way because I'm not quite sure I understand the question fully.
Right, so maybe if that person is an anonymous person, but if you drop us an email after,
Yeah,
sure,
definitely.
Dave will be happy to answer.
I will. It's probably my flu brain. That's probably what it is.
One more. Do you have a top 5 KPI for M365? How do you know that you're doing well with Microsoft 365?
Yeah, I mean it's generally through the dashboards, through the kind of the scores and that kind of thing. Productivity score. All these things are telling you how well you're doing, how implemented, and how safe and secure you are. So using those as the first kind of course is definitely good, paramount. But then building your own KPIs, so understanding what you want to achieve as an organization is really important because you may want to be more secure. You may want to introduce the kind of behavioral analytics and all the other kind of really good stuff with the more advanced security products. But understanding your own KPIs and not just the Microsoft KPIs is really important.
Great. I just had a clarification. It wasn't your flu brain. It was my inability to read, Dave.
All right.
The correct phrasing of the question: what is your view on the client handing management over to an MSP? But not having access to the M365 admin? Would you recommend?
Yeah. It's a difficult one because I don't tend to like it when other people manage tenants on the behalf of customers or handing their kind of management over to IT managed service. Having a managed service partner that's there to help you with your tenant is always going to be more beneficial to you because you're understanding you're learning about your tenant as you administer it, and having someone there that aids with that. So you're in there and you're teaching that organization how to administer in better ways is only going to benefit both you as an organization and that tenant as a whole, your users specifically. So yeah, definitely that's why I would prefer when it comes to that sort of approach. Yeah, that made a lot more sense, Taras, so thanks for that.
Yeah, sorry about that. It was my fault. Great. So I think that's pretty much our time up. So I'll need to wrap it up there. Thanks again for attending. Hope you found this event useful today. As I mentioned, this is part of a regular series of events, so we'll have more webinars coming up. We'll be in touch by email to let you know when the next one's coming. In the meantime, if you want to drop us a line, the address is company-net.com. And thank you very much for attending the event.
Thank you.
Cheers.